All right, everyone. Welcome back to Pick Your Brains today. I have a great guest for us today to learn from. And let's start off by saying she's been a recruiter before. I've come across some of her good content on LinkedIn, and it's pretty good, actually, from my end. So today for Pick Your Brains, we're going to be talking with Diane from Maximum Wage. So,
hi.
How are you today?
I am good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So, since this isn't a job interview, I know we always hate this. I know everyone always hates this question, but what the hell? Instead of tell me about yourself, let's hear a little bit of your beginning story. So, to start off today, I would like to know from you, what state were you originally born in?
Yeah. So I was actually born in Salem, Massachusetts, one of those iconic cities known for hocus pocus and just kind of witches all around. Very iconic for Halloween as well.
So the Headless Horseman, which was originally kind of tied to Sleepy Hollow near where I live, kind of, right?
Mm-hmm. All that fun history stuff. Yes.
Now, I'm going to give you a fun little fact about where I live.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember reading folklore, what two parts of my county are the most famous? We're well known for a state prison which housed one of the most famous criminals in the 1920s, and the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Which prison do you think I'm referring to? We now call it Ossining Correctional Facility. The original name was Sing Sing.
I am not sure. All I know is like Rikers Island.
Sing Sing was the most famous federal prison. It originally homed Al Capone at one point.
Oh, wow.
Anyway,
mm-hmm.
So were your parents from the Dominican Republic?
Yes, my parents were both born and raised there.
What made them come to the United States originally?
Actually, for my mom's side, my great-grandfather decided to just shift his whole family to the U.S. So they came over by boat, and my dad kind of followed.
The other question I would ask, because I had two guests on here, but they're both directly from the island. When your father and mother came here, was Spanish your first spoken language at home?
I grew up learning both at the same time. I grew up more in an English household, and then I moved to Dominican Republic for a few years, and then kind of just grew up learning both.
So you're completely bilingual?
I am completely bilingual, yes.
All right, so what was your original draw to human resources?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually went just from customer service straight into recruiting, actually, high-level customer service, and went into recruiting and really enjoyed helping job seekers with their resumes and interviewing and getting jobs. And then I realized it wasn't enough. So then I went into career coaching.
So I'm going to ask you about that momentarily, but I want to make a little bit of a statement for the audience. Mm-hmm. Considering I'm on the spectrum, I've had differing opinions on recruiting and human resources, but I always felt recruiters should have some level of customer service or retail experience, because it makes it a lot easier for people like me when you understand the industry that I came from. Because I'm going to be honest, whether you agree with me or not, most recruiters on LinkedIn have no understanding that I learned the exact same skills they did in an office. I just learned it a little differently when you're working customer service or retail, because it's not traditional office, but it's kind of somewhat close.
I mean, in both cases, you still are catering to an actual human being. So you have to learn proper communication skills, proper following up skills, all of those, like many of those skills, how to communicate with others, asking them questions to get to a certain answer, those types of things. Like I do definitely agree. A lot of the skills are very similar.
I've looked at how recruiters especially are on LinkedIn. You're, I don't know how many of these recruiters did work a customer service position before, but at the very least, when I've made my comments toward you, I have actually felt that you at least understand where I'm coming from, because let's be honest, with most of the other ones, I don't think they do.
Hmm. Yeah, I've also actually worked with the Rehabilitation Commission for Massachusetts. So I'm very familiar as well, just with, candidates of all different sides on how to assist them with their job search too.
So at one of your jobs, I noticed you were a customer service rep. What
Mhm.
was that company? Was that company public sector or private sector?
It was public. It was with American Express.
So it wasn't a nonprofit organization, if I'm correct, right?
I mean, I think Amex is for profit, but I mean, yeah, it was just their concierge, their customer service line.
Did you find that a lot of the customers or clients that you dealt with were difficult at times?
Yes, they definitely can be sometimes. I mean, these are sometimes high level, like profile clients that are using their American Express, either platinum or black cards. So sometimes, yes, they can be a little bit difficult to work with.
Ever worked in a doctor's office? Because I could tell you whatever you got at working for American Express is multiplied when you deal with people in a medical setting. And in some cases, it's a lot worse.
It definitely can be a lot worse. I haven't myself worked for a doctor, but I have helped a lot of medical professionals obtain jobs with hospitals, clinics, all of that sort around the US. So it's definitely difficult sometimes. There's a lot of challenging personalities in the medical field.
Well, yeah, especially when you're dealing with, in my case, over the last year, we're dealing with whatever is left of our grandparents' generation. Us for millennials, we're now dealing with the next generation down, who are starting to go into their early to mid 90s. We're dealing with, I have found our parents' generation is a little more pleasant to deal with in the doctor's office when they're calling in as patients, but generation right below them, I'm just going to leave it at this. I want to speak to so-and-so because I'm upset. I think you know the reference I'm referring to.
Yeah, and it really depends on the person. Sometimes, they just have that personality where they feel like they deserve to be catered to. And then so I've seen a lot of other people are very humble and just are actually polite. And those are the people obviously we'd rather work with.
Of course. All right, so I think, what made you decide to become a career consultant? So in this case, I know you did that for a university. What was
Yeah,
more interesting
so
about that?
well, from my recruiting days, I really enjoyed that working in higher education. I didn't have to work more than 40 hours a week. I really enjoyed being more hands-on with job seekers, new graduates, and students, really helping them start their career versus working for companies filling their jobs, which was a little bit different. So you answer to the companies instead of the people that are actually needing the jobs.
In other words, your clients, in other words, were basically companies, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Whereas because client is a broad, in my understanding of this, client is a very broad term. You can
Mm-hmm.
either be doing it, you can either be staffing at an agency for an individual, or that the client could in this case be somebody like me.
Yes. So previously, my recruiting days, I was definitely working for companies. Those were my quote unquote clients. So really filling their open job requisitions. And then in higher education, yes, my clients turned into students and graduates.
I had wanted to actually become something related to career services, but the whole issue with colleges is they're so completely so. Actually, you know what? I think I could ask a great question. How would somebody get into career services in a college from a medical background, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I would go probably into a boot camp or a technical school where it's not a traditional 4-year degree. It's more like a certificate type program. And a lot of these programs or schools have medical programs. So they might have something like dental assisting, pharmacy technician, medical assisting, some of those, even billing and coding, some of those entry level healthcare programs. And since you've already been in the field in healthcare, that would be a great bridge to become a career coach or assistant within those schools. That said, a lot of these institutions are run with a DOE in mind. So they have education requirements. Some of them, if it's a certificate school, you might need a 2-year degree versus if it's a university, because their highest level is sometimes master's. That's why universities want either a master's or a PhD to work in their career services department.
Yeah, which means more loans. And in this case, for somebody who might already owe loans, it's not always the best path.
Exactly. Yeah. So
But that
sometimes,
unfortunately would be a topic that I would want to bring you back on my other podcast for, which is a potential panel discussion if you're game for how do you fix post-secondary education.
unfortunately, it's at the DOE level. That's what they require. The only other requirement that can bypass that is years of experience. So let's say you have 6 years of experience, that might help not need that degree.
So how about in somebody like my case, where I've been in retail and customer service as well as the medical field for about 18 years? Could that bypass something like this?
Yeah, it definitely depends on the institution that you're trying to apply to. But if they feel like you're a good fit for the position, then they can definitely use your years of experience in lieu of a degree for the role.
Aha. That's interesting because honestly, at this point in my life, it's not that I don't want to go for another degree. It's that there are some things that I want to get out of the way first before I start trying to figure out how to finance a degree. Now, in your time as a recruiter, I think the audience would actually like to hear from your perspective. Do you believe in terms of the educational options now, especially when, I don't know if any of your clients were trying to get into the tech sector, what do you think is a better path toward getting these jobs? A certification or a traditional computer science degree? Because Justin and I chronically have this debate, and even we're seeing in my industry, healthcare, you still need a degree on some level.
Yes, healthcare definitely. When it comes to IT, it really depends on the entity you're trying to get a job within. So for government, for example, they may require a security clearance plus a couple certifications. Some positions really love that you have a degree, especially the higher up you go within the company or that career path, the more likely you're going to need a degree. But usually just to start out at the very bottom, a certification is the very least. I've seen IT technicians at the very lowest level, and all they need is a CompTIA A+ certification, for example.
CompTIA A+, that's interesting because I have a funny story about that. Last year, one of my first temp to perm contracts, which only lasted a month or less because I did something I'm not necessarily proud of, which was lose company property. It was a government agency, and you literally only qualify for that job literally with having a bachelor's degree at minimum. And that's working for the city government. the county government where I live and the state government have more stringent requirements when it comes to this. And since you mentioned the government, this was a back and forth debate that I had with my father for a bunch of years. But my father has higher degrees and more years of experience in finance. And he just recently got a job now that he's moving back down to DC for at the Department of Transportation, but he's a senior director. But he doesn't understand that his recruiting process and my recruiting process are two completely different things.
They
And
definitely can be.
Because he has an MBA, he's been in corporate finance, and he's also been a CPA. So he's worked for up to 40 years. So that just gives you an idea of where, it's not his fault, but at his level of hiring, there was a disconnect as to why I couldn't get a job, even in the federal government. And part of that was because my resume is not also necessarily geared toward government. It's geared to healthcare.
Yes. Yeah. So if you were to redo it for a government position, you would have to definitely showcase that relevant experience. And government doesn't necessarily mean working for the state, city, or federal. It could be a company that has a government contract too.
Which in theory would potentially have mildly easier requirements. So another good question to ask you would be, how did you obtain a promotion from career services advisor to employee retentions developer? And by the way, that title actually, I've seen that as a job developer at nonprofit agencies because, little brief story for you. Back in 2015 and a couple times when I was a kid, I went through state level job developing through an agency called Access VR, and that's geared toward autistic and handicapped adults. But unfortunately, job developers in this situation were at a little bit of a disadvantage because they didn't understand autism. Gotcha.
Yeah, I worked as a job developer for a bit for adults with disabilities. So that helped definitely. Now I went from career services, just a regular advisor, to employer relations because I was really good at placing students quickly. So I was doing about, I think, like 8 a week. So it went by pretty fast. And since I was really good at finding open positions for students and getting them to interview and job offers, that helped me get that other position. In that employer relations role, I specifically focused on calling healthcare facilities in the US to help students get internships and job offers.
So at the very least, this is probably one reason why I think you and I have a good understanding, because you just mentioned it right there, because you worked with autistic people yourself. So you understand how, unfortunately, we're looked at in the employment aspect, and it isn't always good.
Oh yeah, it's a whole different interview and job search process because you have to also really be aware of ADA laws.
The American with Disabilities Act, for those who are not aware, Diane just kind of mentioned it. The American with Disabilities Act was passed by the federal government under the Clinton, no, it was the Bush Senior's administration, and it had been built on each year, but the idea of it was to have autistic workers, be able to be placed in jobs. However, where I think that act wasn't always going right is the fact that I worked for an organization that basically just hired handicapped and autistic level workers thinking they were the same person, but they couldn't provide a safe working environment. And that was one of the keys with the
ADA. Well, a lot of employers have that policy in place, not only for ADA, but also they get tax breaks when hiring individuals.
My exact problem with this, because if you're only hiring people due to tax breaks, that really says something about you.
Yes.
As an employer. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people who are neurotypical do not understand this. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I honestly have seen it from major employers that refuse, and I don't think they realize, they refuse to hire people that have disabilities, and they've said it straight to my face, unfortunately.
And that's why people like me, I think, are starting to realize, especially in my case, I kind of want to branch off into entrepreneurship for partly this reason and do some level of consulting with this, because I think some of that needs to start changing now with the oldest of the workforce starting to retire.
Mm-hmm.
So
Definitely.
another good question for you is maximum wage.
Yeah.
We're not going to name your partner, but what drew you two together to start this venture?
Yeah, so we both felt like we were unfulfilled in our day-to-day jobs. Even if it was in career coaching, it wasn't the type that we really wanted to do with job seekers and achieve. So we decided to start our own business. Honestly, I know you talk about entrepreneurship. We started with $30. Literally, that's all we used out of our own pockets to start the business. And we never had to take out any personal money since then.
$30. So what did that $30, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, that $30 got us a just a website pretty much, and we just kind of hit the ground running from there.
Interesting, because a popular creator who happens to be a coach, I was supposed to appear on his show on Friday, and his the computer program he uses is from Canada, and I said I can't log on to my phone, which is what I'm using right now. And then he said to me, wait, you use your phone? I'm like, yeah, I don't have a laptop at the moment, and it's worked pretty well for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some coaches and writers.
Sometimes we don't have the money in the beginning to start, as you're saying. And I don't think one is aware of that when you begin a business idea. Is you have to try to be at least a little frugal in the start, because everything's expensive. Look at the cost of streaming services.
Yes, exactly. And I think a lot of people try to say like, oh, I need to have 3,000. I need to have 10,000. If you're having a remote or virtual company, start at the basics. Get it, like, just see if you can even get clients first. Have them and then put that on your taxes if you need to for the next year. But the first objective is to get clients. If you don't have clients, you don't have a business.
When was your original college graduation?
Oh my gosh.
And how many total
a decade
years
ago.
And how many total years of working experience before you decided to start Maximum Wage?
Yeah, so relevant years of experience, probably around like 5 to 6 in the career placement field. And then just started maximum wage from there. And I actually left my 9 to 5 last year.
So you finally started seeing enough revenue coming in that you justified being able to leave the 9 to 5?
Actually, no, that 9 to 5 higher education university, they ended up closing and let everybody go. So I decided, instead of finding something completely new and having that take up most of my time, to use that time into maximum wage.
So interestingly enough, with what I'm doing right now, I can do this off work hours, and the company that I work for, they've been around for a very long time. They were a past medical group. They're, I think I mentioned to you, they're rebranding one more time. This is their second rebrand. The first brand was Mount Kisco Medical Group. The second brand is what I'm at right now. The third brand is going to be United Healthcare. So, under the United Healthcare family. So honestly, for at least now, ideally for me, I would prefer to be leaving, but I could ideally be happy with, what we're doing right now, where this eventually monetizes and turns into another income. I would like to be able to leave, but that's going to take a lot of time to, take this and build this into kind of like a media company.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, at the very least, be putting it on YouTube. That could help with the monetization and subscribers.
That's what I'm doing, because you've seen my YouTube channel.
Yes.
All right, so what I would like to know is the services at maximum wage. What services do you guys both of you sell, and what's the most popular one?
Yeah, so we sell resume writing and career coaching services primarily. People really like that individualized one-on-one coaching. So that really helps. And really our coaching dives into how to find a job without having to network. And on LinkedIn, everybody's like network, find referrals, things like that. So
I
I
have
show,
a problem with that because here's the first thing. First
yeah.
and foremost, networking has apparently turned into an umbrella term. They
Mm-hmm.
don't say what networking is, or when they do, it's basically message the hiring manager or the recruiter. First off,
That is not actually networking.
yeah, I've said it myself in my head, obviously, because if you try to tell them what it is on their own profile, let's be honest, do you think they want to hear it? Nope. There's somebody else that I'm not going to name by name, but a lot of his advice, just like recruiters on LinkedIn and career coaches, is it's obvious. It's honestly very general, and that's not good for people because messaging that person may have worked for you, but they put up certain security features to be able to keep you from messaging them. So how do you get in contact with that person?
Exactly. And some people don't even respond or look at their LinkedIn messages. So it's a
Oh no,
waste.
I still get messages from recruiters in email, and I'm like, I don't even respond to them anymore because I'm working for somebody.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
the first one. I mean, and actually, this is a good reference point. What do you guys teach about on how to get a job without actually having to go through a recruiter or a hiring manager? Because those are the last people that anyone should really be going to.
yeah, so we have a couple different steps. Some of them are recruiters or hiring managers because a hiring manager is still the supervisor normally that you'd be working under. But we kind of just cut out LinkedIn. So we show you people exactly step by step how to create their resumes, how to find the right person to contact, what to say in that contacting, either by phone or by email, how to follow up, what to say on the follow up, how to interview, all of the front to back, and make it very streamlined. There's no like post on LinkedIn. There's no nothing. Even the job applications, we even automate that if necessary. And our clients are advised to not apply to more than 5 jobs a day. It's not some
Oh yeah,
crazy
because
like
that's
8-hour day.
8-hour day. I don't even know how people are doing these marathon job applications and utilizing LinkedIn because I quite frankly feel like LinkedIn is for certain things, but using it to try to reach somebody to job seek isn't the best way to do it. In fact, I'm going to give away a little strategy on how I built a little bit of my following to you in the audience today, and we'll see
Sure.
what you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
When it came to career coaches and their one-size-fits-all advice, because I did a post about this,
Mm-hmm.
I would really strategically go onto their posts. Let's say a few of the bigger ones where it's just like I cringe at it and I would disagree with them. So
Mm-hmm.
recruiters started scanning probably started from there looking at me, kind of looking at my profile. I never really paid attention to that, but it allowed me to access connections on the bigger one. And this is how from 2020, when the pandemic started, to today, I've probably amassed at least 6K,
Wow.
which is a reasonable number for somebody. Like, I don't need to have some of the numbers certain people have, like 20K to a million. Like, what's that going to do for me? Unless you have the right product that you are going to sell. So what would you say in that situation? Do you think that's a reasonable strategy?
What is your strategy? Are you commenting on their posts or
Yes.
are you?
Commenting on their posts was really how I did it, because most of them give away bad advice.
I mean, you have to take career coaching with a
grain of salt.
I wouldn't say grain of salt, with an open eye, and open ears, and just, ask them some relevant, actual questions. If it's like, just contact them on LinkedIn and, you're going to sit and wait for a response, probably not the route you want to go if you actually want a job sooner rather than later.
It also depends on the situation, because when I was looking, I was already employed with people before I got my current company last year. The one advice that I was given that I'm sure you were also given was The best time to look for a job is when you're employed with someone. I mean, I've seen it on LinkedIn before, but typically I was always told a couple things. Don't leave a job until you have another job, or don't leave your and especially one other thing, don't leave your company when there's a recession.
I mean, I know there's starting to be a recession right now, and to be honest, any company that you are with or you're going to be with is a risk. You are an at-will employee, so even if your current company has been stable, there's no telling if they might let somebody go at any time.
That's true, but I will raise a counterpoint on that. In the healthcare industry, what industry do you think is able to continue to do the hiring even in bad economies?
I mean, healthcare definitely is one. You're never going to be out of healthcare. It just depends on which company you're with, and government, really. The government's always going to be there too.
Yes, and the one thing I was going to say about my current company, a lot of people that I worked with have been there for a very long time. Justin and I had a career coach from LinkedIn who ironically actually worked for the same company I worked for. And she came on Opinionated Collective about a week or two ago. She was there since when it was the first brand name. So that should tell you something. And, like my mom and dad, she's a boomer. Some companies in certain areas have grown a good amount that they are actually stable. You're right. I am an at-will employee and they could get rid of me, if they want to. But when you have the situation that I do where a lot of your mid-level managers are nurses, they're not going to fire someone unless they really, really, really think that person is just not for them.
I mean, definitely. But with those mass layoffs, you just never know sometimes. They might, have mergers in the back that people don't know about, or they might need to take away entire divisions. So it definitely can happen. It just might not happen to a more established company.
Not necessarily with an established company. I mean, I think with the rebrand going on, I'll be okay for at least right now, just because the only thing that's different is the name change, but the management is a different story. So we'll see, but at the very least, I'm working on this, and there's other healthcare options within my own area. So here's an interesting question. Since your business is sort of predicated on a level of digital services, would you have any suggestions on digital products that could be tied around the podcast?
Let's see.
Like, do you think ebooks are a good idea?
Ebooks are nice, but what the traditional ebook right now is just like a short pamphlet almost. It depends on how long the ebook is, but really people want transformation. So you want to give something where it's something that people actually are looking for. So maybe first and foremost, post a poll on LinkedIn. And if there's a couple different options that you're thinking of, see what the audience actually wants. So that could be an ebook, that could be a subscription model where you meet with 10 people a week or something. So that could be a couple of different things.
How do you see the workplace since the boomers are effectively, some of the oldest are going to be probably retiring soon, and it's going to be, at different levels with the different ages of the boomers. But do you see all in office remaining? Do you see hybrid, or do you see fully remote eventually becoming, the norm? And for preface of the statement, my father and I were debating this last night.
Honestly, it depends on who's in charge. I've seen different opinions from different managers from the same company. So it depends on the lifestyle of the person at the top. If the person at the top is like, I'm here 40 hours 80 hours a week, so I feel like everybody else should be here at just as much as I am, then you're going to see that similar concept all the way down. If the person at the top is like, you know what, Like I like to take Fridays off, and I have a family that I like to actually spend time with, then the rest of the culture is going to be that way. So it really depends, like company to company. But I do see a shift in hiring where, Gen Zs and millennials are becoming a bit, I won't say demanding, but a bit more preferential to the companies that are giving away more perks. So other companies are kind of conforming in a way.
Now, by perks, what do you mean by what perks would you be referring to?
Yeah, so I've seen anything, and it goes kind of into the total compensation package. I've seen anything, even something new, which is you can work anywhere you want for 2 months out of the year. So you can work remotely for 2 months, and then the rest of the time you have to be either hybrid or in office, for example. So that's a new perk that I've seen lately. But other perks are, stock options, unlimited PTO, actual unlimited PTO, not that fake unlimited PTO.
Limited
But
PTO, I think, was more popular within tech companies because tech companies can't exactly pay, in the startup process, they can't pay the wages.
mhm. Yeah, but I've even seen like bonuses, like end of year bonuses, starting bonuses, all of those nice perks.
I took the new role within my own company right now, partly because of the hybrid to fully remote capability.
Mhm.
The pay is the pay to me. The biggest thing for me was this. Whether you put me on a higher salary or $2 more or kept me on the same salary, so long as I wasn't commuting more than 2 hours a day to a large metropolitan city, I would have been fine with whatever the wages were if you just cut out up to, even just an extra $100 a month by staying within county, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
For me, especially at the age that I'm in, it's not so much the larger salary that I'm looking for. I'm looking for flexibility at this stage in my life.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the millennials and, older groups are as well, especially as people are starting to be more grounded, and possibly starting families or wanting a more established career. They do care about their life outside of work too. And it's starting to show.
Well, that was more of a boomers were considered the workaholic generation,
Hmm.
I would say, or the last of that idea.
Hmm.
But the one thing that I don't always like seeing on social media, especially with our younger counterparts, is the constant boomer bashing. For example, a popular blogger, I did a post about this, was knocking on people who stayed at a company for their whole life last week. And I went on to his post and literally said, you know what? You should just leave them alone because that was the norm back when our parents were starting in the workforce.
Mm. It
I don't
was,
think that was
yeah,
the norm for the oldest of baby boomers. You worked up to 80 hours a week with those long commutes to support your kids.
definitely at times. And then the other part is you didn't have what we have now, which is such a collective feed of opinions through the internet or like straight off your phone. So people didn't really see all these other people having the same thought process and opinions, and able to have such massive change.
There were advantages to growing up in the 90s. I will let
Oh,
you
yeah.
know that I enjoyed more than today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely grew up when the internet was just coming out as well.
Yeah, exactly. So
Those,
you'll understand with what I'm about to say. I felt
mhm.
there was more freedom back then, or like actual freedom. Now, I see our younger counterparts in two different ways with this generation. They have more tech advantages, but they don't have the understanding that I think our age group does when it comes to some level of compromising.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, we definitely kind of grew up in a, having to see a lot of change in our lifetimes. And then, I mean, the second generation down didn't see as much. They grew up with, tablet in front of their face. So it became kind of more, I want this. How do I get this sooner? Or, hey, I finally got it. I don't need to work as hard. that kind of thing.
And here I am at this point in my life wondering what's the best way to either go remote, hybrid, so I can put away money to buy a house. All this technology, I want to buy a house. I want to buy rental property, things like that, that'll create other incomes. That shows you where I think the older millennials are thinking as well in other business sense. So I'm going to ask 2 more questions and we'll see where it goes with these 2 questions.
Sure.
This particular question is, do you believe for autistic and handicapped workers, all in office is a better situation, hybrid, or do you believe companies will keep remote around? Because some autistic people like myself don't mind the office, but I would prefer an eventual being able to go remote to cut out an entire commute.
Yeah, it really depends on
especially once the boomers in healthcare begin to retire. I don't know if I'm going to really want to be in an office around, people that I don't exactly always see eye to eye with. I think what's been good for me has been, a mixture of Gen X and working with boomers, because, it is nice to come to the office for that, but boomers can't practice medicine forever.
I mean, we all age out. Yeah, we all age out into retirement eventually. But as far as really any person, it depends on how you are learning. Some people really prefer more hands-on, high-touch learning, and some people really want autonomy and they just want to be left alone and just to do their work. So that's where your decision and your intent needs to go of what kind of position you want, what kind of environment you want to be in. And that could even be as soon as the interview process. So asking some of those questions, what kind of onboarding, learning culture, 90-day probationary period am I going to have? Does this position allow for hybrid role down the line? If so, how many of your current employees work from home or have a hybrid schedule? If you don't ask that, and if they say, none of our employees have a hybrid schedule, even though it's on the job description, it's probably a red flag. That means they don't actually believe in hybrid or remote.
So basically, it's just misadvertising, and it's most likely going to be an all-in-office situation.
Exactly. Yeah. So you want to uncover those red flags right at the interview process.
Yeah, pretty much. Because what I was going to say is when I look at certain creators on LinkedIn and a lot of their interesting advice, I'm also looking at how would I adapt in an organization where our generation is going to prefer an all-in-office situation with basically a complete narcissist. Would I want to be working around people who are constantly going to wonder, why am I making, why do I like why do I like one salary, or discussing salary? So another good question I would like to ask you is as follows. What are your true feelings on our generation asking what one another's salary is? Because honestly, this is where I am on the salary. Unless you're asking me, why am I making so-and-so? Are you willing to maybe help me potentially negotiate? Why is it your business to know what I'm making? When I also know, to be frank, recruiters are going to probably make a little bit of a higher salary because of having certain skills. A web developer, who'd be asking that question, let's be honest, dang well he has a high level of skills to be able to justify that salary.
Yeah,
do you think it's an annoying discussion? Since we
it
are
is definitely annoying when somebody, it's definitely annoying when somebody brags about having such a specific salary when it's just known that in that industry your salary is going to be typically higher. For example, higher education, even Harvard doesn't pay over $70,000 for a career coach starting out. That's not that much for a prestigious school.
Harvard is probably, I know another career coach who actually now currently works at a large tech company who was living in the Mass area, and she worked at Harvard. I'm pretty sure Harvard probably got away with being cheap when and where they could for a prestigious university due to the name brand.
I mean, they just, for some reason, they just don't pay well, and it does have partly to do with the name, but I have researched other high level institutions or even at other higher education places, and they pay very similarly for starting out, sometimes less. So it really depends on the industry when it comes to salary. The only time salary should be discussed, I feel, is if you're trying to negotiate your own. If it's like, hey, you actually should be getting this much from your job opportunity, try to have a sit down with your supervisor or negotiate your salary in that interview process. Otherwise, you're just boasting about how much money you can make over somebody else.
So interestingly enough, you share the same view as Elizabeth, who I consistently tag on everything along with Justin, because the whole thing with this is I don't mind discussing salary. And one of my colleagues who I posted about, we work at the same company. She was making about $3 more than me, but she also had a master's degree and she had 2 extra years in the medical field, so she could justify that. But one thing I'm just going to point out that was a little disheartening, they have this generation, especially Gen Z, they have more information available to them than we ever did. That's what I got upset with. But she showed how much of an understanding, friend she could be and contact, because she's leaving for another job in October. But we agreed to stay in contact. But she allowed me to look at what she was making, and then I was able to use that as a negotiating tool to say, look, for all the years that I've worked in retail, when I was getting hired internally for the new role, this is what I probably would prefer to be making. Because what she was making was actually $3 more than what I was making. I thought that was apparently appropriate, but it wasn't.
I mean, it depends on the employer. It's actually not illegal to talk about salary at all. But it definitely is disheartening when you find out that another colleague is making more money than you at the same job or, a similar position. That's
why, okay, finish.
No, I was going to say, does the education and experience, the more experience going to play? Definitely. But also the salary negotiation, like you just mentioned, that's how you're able to increase your salary. So that definitely goes into play as well when it comes to your salary. That said, it depends on what you want to do about it when you find out. Do you want to just storm up to your manager and say, I deserve more because Becky's getting paid more? Or do you actually want to have like a civil discussion and see where it goes? And are you prepared to look elsewhere if they're not able to, increase your salary as well?
So in my industry, the way you increase your salary, unfortunately, is going to be tied to education. And I knew this going in. So that means it's either going to have to be a certificate or another degree within the medical industry if I want to make a certain more salary, which is fine right now because, I said to myself, it wouldn't hurt to get, another certification. Now I have a little bit more time for things like that, because I'm not having to wake up the annoying hours to go into the city. So that means more time to skill up. That would be in my industry how you get the skills, because honestly, most realistically, if I were to go to the manager again after a year, I could just look for another role where I could switch departments, once again. It was easy to go from PSA to centralized scheduler, or operator PSA to centralized scheduler due to the customer service, but I may have to stay in the scheduler role for at least a year or two based on going into a degree program, which isn't such a bad thing.
And does your company do tuition reimbursement?
They do, but up to a certain amount. And I would have to pay for the courses first out of pocket, which, it's annoying, but it's fine. Like I said, the fact that the role will go remote is probably going to be able to save me and allow, money and allow me to get the educational expenses.
Yes. And then you can also even put it on your taxes. So you can use it as a tax write-off.
Exactly. So if I don't have anything else, because we definitely went back and forth and covered a good amount, I would ask you
Mhm.
this. Now that I've had you here, would you like to come on the other podcast for future collaborations?
Yeah, sure. Especially if you have like a panel in the future, that would be great. Honestly, the
That's
only
going to be what we do with, yeah.
Mhm. The only other thing that I would suggest to any job seeker out there is, anybody that says your job search schedule is supposed to be 6 to 8 hours a day. I mean, come on, that is way too much. So I would just be purposeful in
That's where I
job
disagree with a
applications.
lot of the, that's where
Mhm.
I disagree with a lot of these coaches, especially one of the two that I interviewed who was in our age group. At one point, she said to me on one of her posts, your job is to find a job, even if it means that you have to do more hours of, searching while you're employed. I'm like, there's only so much time in a day.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're doing it correctly, you shouldn't be searching for job applications. It should be coming to your inbox. So that's something that I help clients with as well, not having to waste so much time searching, and really like exact 3 steps they should be doing every day. And that's it. And most of my clients are getting new jobs within even a couple of weeks.
Tell us the 3 steps that you teach through your business.
Yeah. So number one is applying to 5 jobs. That's it. 5 jobs a day maximum. Number two is following up from the day prior. So that could be by email or by phone call. If there's a position that you're very, very interested in, I would recommend phone call. And I show clients exactly what to say, like I said, on that phone call or in that email. And then lastly, it's to keep track of what you're doing. So whether that is a tracker or you're using a special email account, that's fine too.
Is that the 2-year-old in the background?
Yes, definitely. So if you
The
need to
little
like auto tune
coworker?
me, that's fine.
Yep. All right. So thanks for stopping by today. I appreciate this, and I'm glad we both were able to find the time to do this.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Say goodbye to Diane, and let's thank her for coming on.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
All right. All right, Justin.